Well, welcome to this edition of the Black Madonna Speaks with me, your host, author Stephanie Georgieff, and I'm so pleased to be spending some time with you today. And the reason I've chosen the word resilience for today's program is we're entering a new phase in this very interesting period of human history, and I think there is something that the Black Madonnas have to say to us during this really interesting time. So spring is bursting forth and lockdowns are starting to wear thin. Some governments are easing restrictions, and we're all basically collectively holding our breath in terms of what will happen next. Now, during the first part of this pandemic, I completed a workbook that I offered as a consciousness raising and fundraising gift, and hopefully it will soon be available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. But it was available for the asking until the beginning of May. But the workbook was a reminder that we, all of us, all humans, all over the globe, are experiencing this pandemic. And we're all experiencing it some way very similar and other ways not. And for me, I have to make my recordings outside, so I apologize. Of course, the one time the one plane goes over me, there are no planes flying except when I want to make my recordings. So I apologize that. But I think what's so fascinating about this current experience is that there are more people on planet Earth than there's been at any other time in the entire human history. And also, all of us, so many of us, all of these people that are on the planet at the same time, are experiencing this pandemic. And I personally feel, regardless of where it came from and how it should be handled, et cetera, I do feel that the spiritual world is asking us all to pay attention. Now, as we enter into this new phase, I personally feel the concepts of endurance and resiliency are very important. And I feel that the Black Madonna, as a symbol and viewed as a message coming from the divine, has much to offer us in our very uncertain times. When I first was studying the Black Madonna, I found some very interesting similarities. Initially, I wanted to look at the dates of their creation and the artists who made them. There really were no dates to be had, nor were there any names of artists associated with these works of art. Now, if there was an artist associated with a Black Madonna, it was usually St. Luke the Evangelist. And also, if there were any available dates associated with these Black Madonnas, they were connected to their discoveries, not when they were created. Now here we have an image of St. Luke, and this is a very common image. Sometimes we see him painting, but we often see him writing in a book because he's an evangelist and author of one of the Gospels. And he's usually seated next to a bull. Now St. Luke's symbol is the bull, and the bull is the symbol of will forces and endurance. The color black is the symbol of divine will transforming into human will. So this I find very interesting. St. Luke the Evangelist, they say, is the artist of the Black Madonna. Luke's symbol is the bull, and black is the color of the divine. will, transforming into human will. The other thing we need to keep in mind is that the image of the Madonna in art is the symbol of the human soul. The Virgin Mary, her life, is the symbol of the capacities of the human soul. Now, the age of the majority of the discoveries of the Black Madonnas throughout Europe are associated with the Crusades. We know a large portion of Black Madonnas were brought from the Holy Land in Africa by the Knights Templar during the age of the Crusades and placed in shrines and cathedrals along the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. This path is an ancient path of initiation. Rudolf Steiner tells us that the Crusades were a preparation for the age of consciousness soul, the age we are in now. I find it fascinating that during the last 20 years, there's been a wave of interest in the Camino. Hundreds and thousands of pilgrims walking each year for all sorts of reasons, from all parts of the world, all levels of society, many faiths and traditions, even atheists walk the Camino. This is interesting, don't you think? What I want to bring to you today, during our time together, is some of the stories of Black Madonnas that I feel have resonance for our current age, and particularly this era of pandemic and its aftermath. Black Madonna stories are stories of survival of everything, from fires to bombs, earthquakes, wars, vandalism, religious conflicts, you name it. Even when they are destroyed, they reappear through recreation from the imagination of artists and from the demand of the faithful. Our first image is Our Lady of the Underground, and excuse my French pronunciation, sous terre, I think that's how you say that, but the underground. This image is currently in the crypt of Chartres Cathedral in France. And what's interesting about Chartres Cathedral is that it's built over a spring that has been sacred to people for thousands and thousands of years. And not only does this sacred shrine have a sacred well, but the well was always associated with the dark goddess, because in ancient times, particularly the time of the Druids, the Black goddess was associated with water and fertility. Now, what's interesting about this Madonna is the original one, this is not the original, but the original one was silver gilt, which eventually turned black and was in the main cathedral. And eventually what this image did was every year it was brought up from the crypt and put into the main sanctuary on May 1st, and then was put back down into the crypt on October 31st. During the French Revolution, there was quite a campaign to destroy all images of religious worship. And a favorite target, for some reason, was the Black Madonna. This image was burnt at the stake in Chartres, but was recreated from the imaginations and the copies and drawings made from artists who really loved this image. So in the early 1500s, or I'm sorry, mid 1800s, this image that we see now was carved and lovingly placed on the main altar in Chartres Cathedral crypt. So she's an interesting story of even after destruction coming back. This image is a close-up of Our Lady of Czestochowa. And she has a really fascinating story, very lengthy one actually, but I just want to focus on those lovely, not so lovely, but those very, very famous gashes in her cheek. Now, there are two stories of Czestochowa. One is that vandals broke her into three pieces and she miraculously mended the next day. And another legend said that vandals came in and were slashing her cheeks. And after the third slash, apparently that was the charm, and the person trying to slash her fell over dead. I don't like that part, but it shows that you shouldn't try and deface religious artifacts in Poland. And the other part of the story that is so interesting is that every time the slashes have been tried to be covered with paint, they apparently bleed through. So much so that they stopped trying to repair it and just incorporated the slashes on the cheek as the image of this Madonna. Now, this Madonna is Our Lady of Antipolo. She's in Manila in the Philippines, and she was originally carved in Mexico and was brought to the Philippines by a parish priest. And apparently, the journey from Mexico to the Philippines was rife with great and perilous challenges. And apparently, there were 3 or 4 terrible storms and also a terrible fire that broke out on the ship. But the faithful said that this image helped guide the ship and the crew to safety during a very, very troubled voyage. This is one of my favorite Black Madonnas, and many Black Madonnas, particularly on the Iberian Peninsula throughout Spain and Portugal, when the Islamic incursions onto the Iberian Peninsula started in the 700s, there was quite a campaign to destroy religious images. So many, many Black Madonnas were hidden, sometimes for hundreds of years, and then were discovered through various miracles. Well, the miracle surrounding this image was that she was hidden in the 700s as there were invading armies, and actually lay dormant for almost 500 years. And a bull strayed from a herd, and the farmer came after him. And in some of the legends, they say the bull was dead, and in others, they said he was just standing, mooing incessantly. And in the ones where they said he died, when the farmer decided to say, well, I'll at least salvage the skin, as soon as he put the knife into the animal jumped up and was alive. And in both versions, either the dead bull or the living bull, a vision of the Virgin Mary came to the farmer and said, there's an image under the ground where this bull is standing. You need to dig and you will find me. And that's what they did. And this is the image they found. And apparently what the locals do to this day is when their children start to walk, they bring their children to this image and ask for a blessing. And I think it's so interesting that this has a picture of, or actually a sculpture of a bull next to it. And bull is the symbol of both St. Luke and also will. And walking, learning to walk, is one of the first actions we all human have when it comes to exerting our will. That's a big deal when you learn how to walk. Now, this also is another Spanish Black Madonna, Our Lady of Montserrat. Oh, and I'm sorry, the lady before is Olot, Our Lady of Olot, O-L-O-T. Now, this lady is Our Lady of Montserrat, and Montserrat basically means Sawtooth Mountain. And she also is attributed to St. Luke the Evangelist. Apparently, he carved her while listening to the Virgin Mary talk about the childhood of Jesus. And she also was hidden from invading forces and was placed for safekeeping. And apparently, the record archivists weren't too efficient in this part of the Iberian Peninsula, so nobody knew where they had hidden her. And about 100 years after she was hidden, the shepherds in the valley at the foot of Montserrat, near a village called Montserrat, were tending their flocks at night, and they saw this beam of light coming out from the top of the mountain, and they heard angelic music. It was just extraordinary. And they saw this for several nights in a row. And after 3 or 4 experiences, they decided to go to the village priest to say, we're witnessing something very unusual and you need to check this out. And after the priest witnessed it, he went to the local bishop, and the bishop said, we need to investigate. So they all waited at the foot of the mountain. And when the beam of light came and the music started, they went on a search team, and they were led to a cave. And inside the cave was this image. So the similarities between the Luke Christmas narrative is very, very evident, but also the fact that she had been hidden in a cave for over 100 years and was found intact, I think is a lovely, lovely image. Now, this is Our Lady of Einsiedeln, and this is a very famous Black Madonna in Switzerland, and she's considered the Germanic Black Madonna. And the original statue, which this is the original, was carved in the early 1400s and was a beloved image of the Virgin Mary for centuries. And those Napoleonic soldiers ventured up into Switzerland, and news carried fast in those days, and it was an all-points bulletin saying, if you have a Black Madonna, hide it because these guys will burn it. So they hid her in the countryside somewhere, and after the soldiers left, feeling rather as a failure because they hadn't burnt another Black Madonna, then the monks brought their beloved image of the Virgin Mary back and decided to give her a little bit of a makeover. She was looking a little worse for wear, and they thought, let's clean her up. You know, new page, we lived through this terrible upheaval, and they cleaned her up and they painted her white. And the local parishioners didn't like that. And they said, where's our Madonna? This isn't our Madonna. And so the monks gave in to popular demand, and they painted her a very dark ebony as well as the child. And this is how she looks till this day. Now, this image is really interesting. She is outside of London, and she was a Black Madonna associated with a well. And with the onset of Christianity, they made an official statue. They carved an official statue, which was a Black Madonna. And again, during the Reformation, everybody got quite upset with images of Black Madonnas. And so the original statue was burnt, and they even closed down the shrine because it bore the name of Saint Mary. And apparently that was a little too Catholic for these very, very devout Protestants. So they closed the chapel and burnt the statue. And when things settled down a little bit, they found a copy of the original Black Madonna and put it back into the church when it was reopened. And then in the 1970s, this statue that you see now was commissioned and designed from pictures of the original Black Madonna. So it's very interesting that up to the 1970s, people were replacing these statues because they just love their Black Madonnas. And this image here is a new statue, actually. Again, the original was a victim of the Napoleonic soldiers. She had been part of this shrine in Le Puy-en-Velay, which I'm sure I'm not saying that properly, but Le Puy is a very, very popular entrance to the French Camino. And it's absolutely stunning. If you can ever go here, it's just absolutely beautiful. And this was a very much venerated statue that people prayed to before they went on their Camino. And there were many pictures, many copies, many images of this Madonna that were scattered everywhere, actually. And when the Napoleonic soldiers came in, they, of course, put her on a pyre and set the pyre on fire. But what's interesting is that she just wouldn't burn. They kept adding more and more wood and hoping that if the fire got stronger and stronger, eventually she would burn. And it just took a ton of wood because this statue did not want to burn. But eventually, unfortunately, it did. But before she was fully engulfed in flames, there was a little trap door with a scroll in her head, at the base of her neck. And apparently it burst open and the scroll came out, but it caught fire before anybody could save it. Well, the locals were absolutely devastated that their beloved image had been destroyed. But again, due to the imagination and dedication and many drawings and copies, this new, improved Black Madonna has been created and now adorns a special chapel that pilgrims gather in and hear a special mass before they go on their Camino. So our age, our current age, is extraordinarily difficult, and it is heartbreaking on every level imaginable. Any slight observation of history, I would say in the last 3,000 years, it's very, very difficult. It's full of suffering, of trials, pandemics, wars, natural disasters, religious upheavals. It has been a difficult period, and I would argue since the onset of the 1900s, it has also been quite difficult. And this current pandemic has opened very unpleasant and relentless images and issues of major injustices of our planet and our modern culture. While experts and restless citizens can argue whether or not the lockdown was necessary, and I want you to know I'm not on either side. There's arguments on both sides, and I think we'll be arguing about that forever. But what is true is that it happened everywhere at the same time. The economic and political aftermath will be more painful than anything we've experienced on many continents at the same time in 3 generations, and it will be felt by everyone. How we respond, what is the path forward? Can we ever get back? Or do we even want to? I see almost Mona Lisa smiles from some of the Black Madonnas, scars on Czestochowa's cheek, the darkened black skin of Madonnas who were burned for centuries to escape political and religious upheaval. they were buried, for centuries to escape political and religious upheaval. And the new Madonnas that had been made from the memories of the ones destroyed by mobs. Through everything, natural disasters, wars, upheavals, these somber, dark, beat-up images keep enduring. They keep coming back. The Black Madonna, the symbol of the human soul as a vessel for the divine, will, keeps present, is resilient, and comes back in new forms after they have been destroyed. This is the message. The human soul can endure and is resilient. Please take care of yourselves. Difficult days are to come. Take care of one another. The spiritual world is using this very difficult experience for our good. I'm not saying the spiritual world gave it to us, but what the spiritual world is asking us to do is to make it useful, to use our talents, our prayers, and our wills to help heal the many ills of our modern culture. May the Black Madonna be your inspiration during these difficult times. Thank you for joining me, and blessings on your journey.